But I know you have not heard about this information. Why? Because when white people colonize the world, they also colonize the information about the world. So white people hid the information about yourself. They didn't want to tell you you were a great person. Let me give you examples of something that you know. You've all read about the Bible, haven't you? Yeah? Now, who wrote the first 5 books of the Bible? Who can tell me? Who wrote the first 5 books of the Bible? Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible. We don't know his second name. You know, he had only one name. Unlike you, who have 2 English names and 1 Langi name. What is your name? John James Okecho. Where did you get John from? My parents. Were your parents English? No. Were they Scottish? No. What about your grandmother? No. And your grandfather? No. So where did you get John from? I don't know. Do you have a grandfather? Yes. Did he have a long name? Yes. Why are you not named after his name? I don't know. What does the word John mean? I don't know. Maybe it means a saint somewhere. But for a start, I want to excite you in this word called melanin. Melanin. Who knows this word? Who of you knows melanin? You haven't started learning, particularly if you're a black person, unless you know what melanin is. Melanin is a carbon that does not deteriorate over time. Melanin is your black skin pigmentation. Or in plants, it is equivalent to chlorophyll. But it is the most powerful thing that you can have. In terms of people, we gauge your importance on the amount of melanin you have. So we say the darker the better. The darker the better. Now, this melanin is responsible for a lot of things, and I want you to write them down. I hope you have where to write, students. Number 1, it protects you against the ultraviolet rays of the sun and the energy from the earth. So, when the sun hits your body, certain rays are allowed in, certain rays are filtered out. It stops you getting skin cancer. Then it protects you against the energy from the earth, which means if you are standing, it anchors you. Like in electricity, you have earthing. Yeah? When something is earthed, it's not hit by lightning. You know that. So, if you are standing here with a white person and lightning struck, it would pick a white person, throw him there, you would remain standing tall, blessed of the sun, because of your melanin.
Let's talk about melanin. This color and probably your color as well. You see, every human being has melanin. Melanin is like a paint that is there on the skin, you know. It protects your inner organs because the skin is the largest organ in the human body. He who does not know his beginning will walk in circles over his own shadow. So this proverb invites us to look backward before we look forward. It tells us that a human being who does not understand their origin, their identity, and the foundation from which they come will always be confused by the path in front of them. Their shadow becomes their prison because they mistake it for an enemy. This is the perfect doorway into the question of black identity. The history of melanin, the science of human skin color, and the long political and theological battle about black people's place in the world. We are going to watch a video, and after watching the video, we are going to use a touch of deconstruction, you see, to analyze the importance of melanin based on the arguments that will be spoken. I'll also add my own points by the end of the video.
So, number 1, protects you against the ultraviolet rays of the sun. Number 2, protects you against the energy from the earth. It anchors you. Number 3, melanin is responsible for healing. When you cut yourself, if you cut yourself, you see blood, you see something red, there may be white. And when it starts healing, a dark skin comes and covers it, or a dark patch comes and covers it. That dark patch is melanin. Melanin sends reinforcement around the area that is affected and brings about healing. So melanin is also responsible for healing. Melanin is responsible for a sleeping cycle, how you sleep. If you don't have melanin, you don't sleep properly. You have what they call insomnia. Melanin controls fatigue. So you are not tired most of the time. So other people who don't have melanin, they have fatigue. If they travel in a plane, they get what they call jet lag. Then melanin is also responsible for something else, what we call a corresponding cosmic connection. It links you to the universe. You begin feeling something. You feel energy pulses. There is a lot of energy that is here that you don't see. Energy you don't see, but you can harness it. For example, if somebody calls you on phone, you don't see the sound traveling in the air, but it comes to your phone. So there is a ultraviolet, ultra high frequency signal that comes to your telephone. Are you with me? So, for example, one way you can test a corresponding cosmic connection is when a black person hears a music pulse, a sound pulse, an energy sound. So if I say na 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 na, oh Africa, Africa, na 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 na, oh Africa, straight away you feel the rhythm. Even before you hear it pulsate through your veins. If it was a white person, they wouldn't feel the rhythm. And if they started dancing, they would be jumping up like this, and then they would do this, and they would not move in tandem with the rhythm because they don't have melanin. They do not have that corresponding cosmic connection. The corresponding cosmic connection also means that you could be seated here, and something happens to you, and your mother at home will see a leaf fall from a tree, and you say, there's something wrong with my son. Or you could be going somewhere and you see a rat cross the road. You say, this is not a good thing. So that nature works with you, not against you, to warn you, you are at harmony with nature. So that's another thing that melanin does. Protects you against the ultraviolet rays of the sun, the energy from the earth. Melanin controls hearing. Melanin controls fatigue. Melanin gives you a corresponding cosmic connection. But melanin also does something else. Melanin gives you dominant genes. Dominant genes. Now, you know the science of genetics. Yeah? You know genetics, genes. That science started around 1822 with a gentleman called Gregor Mendel. Gregor Mendel was an Austrian from Austria, and he was a Catholic priest from the Augustine monks. He was an Augustine monk. Augustine lived around the 2nd, 3rd, 4th century AD, and he was the black person who lived in North Africa in a place called Hippo Regius, who wrote the laws of the Catholic Church. Because most of you think that, white people brought religion and they taught you how to read and write. That's all not true. That's what we call his story, the white man's side of the story. It's not our story. It's not true. So I am just telling you that Augustine of Hippo was this bishop who wrote the laws of the Catholic Church. Now, the followers of Augustine are called Augustinian monks. And one of the Augustinian monks was Gregory Mendel, who lived in Austria around 1822. And in Austria, he was looking at genes, because at that time, white people were wondering where humanity started. Who were the first people to populate the world? And they thought that white people were the first people to populate the world. And at the time, Christianity was very heavy in Europe. It's not the same now. If you go in a church in England, you will probably find about 2 or 3 people, the priest and his assistant and maybe one other person, unless it's Christmas. So they were first looking in Europe. Then they couldn't find, the oldest they could go was 40,000 years. Then they went to Asia, the oldest they could go was 900,000 years. And then they came to Africa. And the oldest they could go in Africa was about 1.5 million years. So Mendel wanted to find out using genes, inherited characteristics. Because you know, when a man meets a woman, in Africa we say you have a spiritual congress. European people say you have sex. In Africa we don't have sex. We don't even have a word for it. We call it a spiritual congress. But when a man meets a woman, they exchange first genes. And the first genes they exchange is called nuclear DNA. And you share, almost equal sequence that sit on your chromosome. So you have a certain equal percentage from the male and the female. But there is a certain gene that the mother passes on to the child without going through the filtration process. That is called mitochondria DNA. Mitochondria DNA. Sometimes it's written like this. Mitochondria DNA. That one the mother passes to the child without going through filtration process. The father doesn't contribute to that DNA. So if we want to find out who is your father, we will just look at your mitochondria DNA. But the inherited characteristics pass through from the nuclear DNA. So Mendel was looking at these characteristics, and he was looking at plants to see what does a father plant give to a child plant. What does a mother plant give to a child plant? And then he went to animals. And Mendel concluded that if you began with white people, you would you'd never have got black people. Because white people have what they call recessive genes. Do you study that? You study recessive genes? You also study dominant genes. You study that? Now, if you study recessive genes and dominant genes, you know that a recessive can never produce a what? A recessive can never produce a dominant. But a dominant can do what? Very good, very good. Some of your fees, went for a good cause. Huh? If you know recessive genes, you can never stay away from that. Recessive genes. No two white cats can produce a black cat. No two white goats can produce a black goat. No two white cows can produce a black cow. No two white chickens can produce a white chicken. And no two albinos, no two white people can produce a black person. Why? Because black is dominant and white is recessive. Which means what? It means you produced white people. If you had begun with white people, if Adam and Eve had been a white person, you would not be here. It means that you, who has melanin is the most incredible, most powerful thing that you can have. You have no idea what melanin is, what being black means, what having black skin is. White people today, that's why I said go and look for this, melatonin. You will find thousands and thousands of products made out of melatonin. White people inject their lips to have fresh lips, like a black woman's or a black man's. Because white people have no lips. Their lips are almost like this. You know that. Those of you have seen white people. They are cut short. There wasn't enough material. But for you, being the first person, you utilize all the material to make yourself into a full person. Yeah? White people are injecting their breasts to have full breasts like a black woman. Because most of white people don't have. They have like flat chest. You sometimes see, is it a man? And now they wear trousers. Say, a man or woman? And because of plastic, they also have beards. So you don't know whether you're really dealing with a man. But quite significantly, white women are injecting their behind with melatonin so that they can have what they call steatopedia, the unusual accumulation of fat on the black woman's behind. Whereas white women have what we call ironing board backside, completely flat. There is nothing there. Yeah? So there is nothing more beautiful than being a black person. Nothing more powerful than being a black person. There is nothing more beautiful. Listen to me. White people, you know, most of the time, as black people, we hate ourselves. And unless we deal with that hatred amongst black people, we cannot achieve anything. You can't become a scientist, you can't become a historian, you can't become successful, you can become only successful to a limit where everybody is trying to put you down. But why do we hate ourselves? Because we were told in the Bible that we were cursed. Haven't you heard that? The curse of Ham? That we were cursed as the sons of Ham. And yet, cursed in the Bible, Noah, who was a drunkard, cursed Canaan. He didn't curse, he cursed one son of black people, but not all. Because Noah was also a black person, according to the Bible. And, you know, hopefully we'll come, you know, and cover this. So, we hate ourselves. And even in everyday language, if I want to cheat you, I blackmail you. If I want to put you on a bad list, I'll blacklist you in a what book? In a black book. Haven't you heard that? That will put you in a black book. Teachers used to have black books. Do they still have them? Yeah? Change their name. Call them white books or, you know, danger books. Now, if it is a bad spot on the road, it is called a what spot on the road? A black spot. If it is a bad trading day, it is called a black day. If it is in a legal market, it is called a what market? A black market. Which means if there are black people in the market, then the market is illegal. You are not supposed to trade. Yeah? As long as you see black people, it's illegal. You know? So, we wear black for funerals. And when we wear mosquito nets for weddings, what color are they? Hey, you have not seen the wedding dresses. What do you think they make them out of? Mosquito net, except there are many of them piled together. So stay away from them when you get married. Huh? Don't go and get a mosquito net and then they have a long one so that when it's walking, it keeps cleaning the street. Yeah? I don't know why they do such a thing. So, when you wear white for weddings and you wear what color for funerals? Black. Now, in your homes, the pictures of God that you have is what color? Be honest. Tell the truth and shame the white man. What color are the pictures on the wall in your homes? White. And what color then is the devil? So if I kill all of you, I have fought the devil, won't I? Is that not, doesn't it make sense? If I am a Christian, and they say onward Christian soldiers, if I am a soldier of Christ, my job is to fight the devil. What does the devil look like? Isn't it black? When you go in a military college, the sabao, when you are learning how to shoot, the target practice is what kind of head? It's a black head. So it is no wonder that black people hate themselves. Because every time you see God, you are not thinking of your sister or your mother or your uncle. You are not thinking of Kiurankuba as looking like God. No. You are thinking that somebody else, not you, looks like God and you look like the devil. And most of the time, if I look like the devil, I am told I'm a devil, then I act like a devil. I don't want to disappoint people. People thinking that, I'm a wonderful person. Let me try to live up to the part. That's what psychology says. But I'm here to tell you today, number one, that when God created the world, there were no white people at all. There were no Chinese. There were no Indians. There were no Italians, no Romans, no Germans, no Poles, no Finns, no Swedes, no Goths, no Vandals, no Visigoths, no Vikings. There were only black people. Only black people. They were probably at the time darker than you. So, if you read any sacred text and it says that you are created in the image of God and in the likeness of God, it means God is what color? Black. And anytime anybody gives you a God who doesn't look like you give him that God back. You say, you know what? Yeah, your God looks okay, but just take him. Because at the dawn of time, there were no other people on earth but us. None. And you know, the most interesting story is that story unfolded around this river that passes through your district. The Nile. That is where humanity began. To the extent that UNESCO, United Nations Educational Scientific Committee Organization, in volume 2, chapter 1, it says, as a result of the work of Professor Like and other subsequent work, it leads us to conclude that more than 150,000 years ago, beings morphologically identical with the man of today were living in the area of the Great Lakes, at the foothills of the mountains of the moon, at the source of the Nile, in the land of the gods, and nowhere else. UNESCO, nowhere else. Humanity went through 5 stages. The first stages are known as Australopithecine, black. Where were they living? Where you are living. How old? How long ago? 5.5 million years ago. Who was living in Europe at that time? No one. Who was living in Asia at that time? No one. Who was living in America North? None. America South? None. Bismarck Archipelago? No one. Australia? Tonga? None. Haiti? Fiji? Samoa? Who was living there? No one. Humanity was only here. 3.5 million years ago, Homo habilis. Where was he living? Here. Was he living elsewhere? No. 1.5 million years. Humanity at the stage of Homo erectus, the African that walks upright. Where is he living? Here. He lives here to populate the world. He passes through the Gulf of Eden, avoids Saudi Arabia, crosses into India. And then he goes through Kenya, Mijikenda, Tayar in Australia, and populates all the islands in between. Avoids Israel, avoids Jordan, avoids Syria. He also discovers fire. Then 150,000 years, modern man, known as Homo sapien. Homo sapien. The oldest Homo sapien, the bones discovered in Omo Valley in Ethiopia and Kenya. He started where? Here. Then he moves with his feet and his cows, mobile food, and his language, articulated symbolic language, and his brain, a bigger cranium, and he populates Europe. He is the first person to populate Europe about 40,000 years ago, known as Gromordi. The first people to populate Europe were black people. They were known as Gromordi. First people to populate England were black people. They were known as Bika. First people to populate India were black people. They were known as Dravidians. First people to populate Japan, black people. They were known as Masaba Negroes. Mulembe, Kamaku, Wagasile, they came from here. They populated Japan. That's why Japanese names are like Ugandan names. Takahara, Nakamura, Kato, Toyota, all those, because the first Japanese were black people. In ancient time, the whole world belonged to the black man, the black woman. You are the people that populated the world. You are the people that gave birth to everybody else. And quite significantly, and I am telling you this as a scholar, I have a library of 32,000 books. I have read each one of them, not only read them, but remember them. I have traveled in almost every corner of the world, lectured at the most prestigious universities. I am telling you that in ancient time, the ordinary people who are on earth were you and your ancestors. You. And you are also the people of the scriptures. All scripture, be it the Rig Veda, the Namapali, the Peremperu, the Papyrus of Ani, the Papyrus of Hunefa, the Quran, the Bible, the Book of Zoroaster, the Epic of Gilgamesh, is all about black people.
So after carefully watching this video, here is my deep critical analysis. First one, the origin of human skin color. Have you asked yourself one time, what color did the first human being have? Was he black, was he brown, or was he white? I know to some extent this is a question that has triggered your mind. Most likely if you're a black person and you know how much black people are treated around the world. So this question is something that must bother you as well. And so I have you. You see, all human beings' origin comes from the African continent. This is not a symbolic statement. It's a factual statement. It's a denotational statement. You know, it's not connotational. It doesn't hide anything. It's not metaphorical. All human beings come from Africa, and that's it. Simple fact. You see, it is genetic, biological, archaeological, and historical. You know. The earliest Homo sapien fossils were found in Omo Kibish in present-day Ethiopia. You see, Jebel Iremud in Morocco and other sites that shows the first modern human had darky pigmented skin. But why, you may ask yourself? Because early human beings lived in regions with high ultraviolet radiation, UVR, and the body needed melanin to survive. So without melanin, early humans would have suffered severe DNA damage, infertility, and high infant mortality. The dark pigmentation was not an accident. It was a gift of adaptation, a necessary defense for survival. This is where we begin to see the first contradiction that deconstruction reveals. Blackness, originally the universal human condition, later became the basis for global discrimination. The feature that ensured the survival of the species would later be used to mark some people as inferior, you know. That's something very ironical. That which is a survival feature, people now have turned it into a discriminatory feature. A discriminatory feature that makes you look inferior to other human beings, you know. There are three major types of melanin in the human body. We have the eumelanin, the brown and black, you see. This kind of melanin is highest in people of African descent. Another melanin we have is the pheomelanin, the red/yellow melanin. This is more prominent in lighter-skinned people. The third one, we have the neuromelanin. So the neuromelanin is found in the brain. It is related to neural function. So there are three kinds of this melanin that you must understand. Dark-skinned individuals have high eumelanin concentration, which provides, first of all, it provides protection against sun damage and skin cancer. Another thing is it regulates heat from us, you know. And the third one, it is an antioxidant property. And the third one is the melanin accelerates, you know, wound healing. It makes a faster wound healing, you know. It also brings about slow visible aging. You see, if you look at an African who is 80 years and you look at a white person who is 80, leave 80, let's do 50. If you look at a white person who is 50 and an African who is 50 and they are not struggling in life, I'm telling you, you'll see a huge, huge difference. The African will look younger than the white person. You know, not just white, not just white. It isn't about white and black, no. Take any dark person and any light-skinned person. Dark skin tend to hide aging, you know, it hides aging. So here we see the irony. The very characteristics that science defines as protective and advantageous were historically framed by colonial societies as primitive or undesirable. You see? Now this critical analysis and my deconstruction asks a simple question. Why would something be beneficial, that is beneficial, be called inferior? You see, who benefits from this lie? It's such a big lie, you know, who benefits from it? Again, we have melanin as a theological symbol. You see, God, creation, and the gift of pigmentation. Across African spiritual traditions, darker skin was often understood as a sign of closeness to the earth, strength, resilience, and divine craftsmanship. Many creation stories from the Dogon, from the Oromo, from the Akan, describes humanity emerging from dark clay soil, you know, or cosmic matter. Skin color was not a hierarchy in the past. It was a natural part of creation. The Abrahamic faiths do not state that black skin is a curse. So the Abrahamic religions or the faith, Christian, Islam, and Judaism, you see? Later European interpreters inserted crucial racial meaning into biblical stories. So they inserted lies. It's like a virus that affects a system, you know? They started putting lies into the scriptures, you see? So these racial lies that were added to the scriptures, especially through the false narrative of the curse of Ham, you know, the idea was not originally religious. It was a political tool used to justify slavery and segregation. You see, this is the moment where deconstruction exposes the mechanism. A theological idea was twisted to justify an economic system. The Bible did not create racism. People created racism and used the Bible as a shield for it, you know. The second is the myth of inferiority versus the science of melanin. During colonialism, Europeans encountered African societies with, first, African societies had strong kingdoms. African societies had advanced iron smelting. Another one is African societies had complex spiritual system. Another one is African societies had large populations. Another is African societies had agricultural innovation. To justify dominating these societies, Europeans had to create an intellectual argument. They constructed the idea that black skin was a symbol of 1, primitivity, 2, backwardness, 3, closeness to animals, 4, loss of intelligence. Yet, the scientific reality is that melanin has no negative correlation with intelligence, creativity, or ability. The racist theory of the 18th and the 19th century by people like Linus, Blumenbach, Gobineau were pseudoscience and were used to legitimize colonial exploitation. You see? Again, here is where my critical analysis and deconstruction comes into play. The people who claimed blackness were inferior, you see? Or rather, the people who claimed that blackness was inferior were the same people who depended on black labor, black bodies, and black land for their wealth and global expansion, you know? So be proud of your black skin. I'm telling you, just be proud. Say hallelujah. Be proud you have a black skin. So here's the science of pigmentation. See how skin color developed. Human skin color is shaped by the interaction of, first of all, UV exposure intensity. The more you are in a place that has a high intensity of UV, you will have darker skin, lower melanin, you know? You understand? Dark skin is equal to more melanin, lighter skin, less melanin. And I also told you the types of melanin we have. There are 3. Another thing that affects skin pigmentation is the altitude. We have the latitude, we have vitamin D requirements, and then we have nutritional environment. You see? People who migrated out of Africa into colder, darker regions needed less melanin. Low UV conditions forced the human body to lighten pigmentation to produce enough vitamin D. Thus, the light skin is an adaptation to low sunlight, not a marker of superiority or civilization, you know? So we have some things called genetic details of pigmentation. Genes such as the MC1R, the SLC24A5. We have again the SLC45A2 and the TYR influence pigmentation. African populations have the highest genetic diversity on Earth, meaning the greatest range of skin tones and adaptation patterns. This again destroys the racial hierarchy. Europeans are generally younger and less diverse than Africans. Race, therefore, is not a biological category. It is a political category created for social control, you know. So we have also the biological strength of the melanin. Scientific studies shows that melanin absorbs more than 99% of harmful UV radiation. Melanin repairs DNA more efficiently. Melanin slows aging. Melanin protects neutral tissue. Melanin reduces risks of multiple skin disorders. Instead of a defect, melanin is a biological advantage. The idea of melanin deficiency, creating lighter skin frames, creating lighter skin reframes whiteness in scientific terms, not as superiority, but as an adaptation, and in certain ways, vulnerability. You see, this argument that racism is not a biological thing, but a political thing, shifts the arguments of colonial mindset, you know, that this certain skin color is inferior. No, it shifts because it's not biological, it's political. And actually, the more you have it, the more advantageous, you know. So we also had the colonial rewriting of human color. European colonizers used several strategies to redefine blackness. Pseudo-theology, claiming dark skin was a curse. They used pseudoscience, measuring skulls and fabricating race hierarchies. We have pseudo-history, erasing African civilization from record. The third one was pseudo-psychology, you know, creating stereotypes about black emotion and intellect. If black people are inferior, is a question I'm asking you. Why were there systems, or rather, why were there extreme systems of violence required to suppress them? Inferiority should not require chains. Power fears resistance, not weakness, you know. Today, melanin research is ongoing in neuroscience, medicine, and cosmetic science. Some pharmaceutical companies are exploring melanin-based technologies for, first, radiation protection, brain disease treatment. We have aging studies. We have also energy transfer systems, you know. Ironically, the very substance used to degrade black people historically is now seen as a biologically valuable, you know. So blackness as a threat to the racial order. Throughout history, societies built on white dominance have treated blackness as a political and a psychological threat. And here's why. Segregation existed. Anti-black policing is common. Another one is beauty standards excluded dark skin. Another one is media stereotypes dehumanized black people, you know. And here's another question I ask you. The threat was never the skin. The threat was the freedom, intellect, and the autonomy of the black people, you know. So, when a lie, here's how the mechanic works. When a lie is repeated for generations, some begin to believe it. Racism damages not only social systems, but also inner identity. Black children growing up under anti-black narratives must navigate first self-doubt, self-policing, internalized shame, fear of appearing too black, the pressure to fit white norms, you know. The psychological battle is one of the most harmful legacies of misunderstanding the science of pigmentation. And across the world, black communities have resisted misrepresentation. And how have we resisted this? We have resisted through reclaiming African history, redefining beauty standards, studying scientific truths, building new political movements, challenging misinterpretation of religion as well. This is not simply a pride, it is a survival. Knowledge is a form of liberation, you know. Again, this argument touches on the creation, on the theological part, you know. If God created human beings with different pigments based on their environment, then diversity is something which is intentional, not accidental. The theology of creation sees variation as a form of divine balance. Melanin becomes, first of all, a natural armor. Second, a symbol of adaptation. Third, a gift of protection. Fourth, a sign of humanity's oldest lineage, you know. It does not make black people more divine than others, but neither can it be framed as a curse, you know. Many African spiritual systems teach that the body is not separate from the spirit. Thus, melanin is part of the human sacred design. The biblical idea that all humans are made in the image of God dismantles any claim that black skin is less worthy. You know, through critical analysis and through deconstruction, we see that racist theology collapses under its own contradiction, you know. Being black is not being other. It is being the first in the human timeline. It means carrying the oldest genetic memory. It is the deepest evolutionary history and the foundational biological form, you see, form. And again, melanin is this. Melanin is a biochemical shield. It is a neurological component. It's also an evolutionary masterpiece. It is also a part of human biological intelligence. You see? None of these arguments support any idea of inferiority. And also another thing you have to know is that blackness can also be seen as a social construction. Race was built by power, not nature. Therefore, dismantling racism requires deconstructing the political system that invented it. He who does not allow his beginning invented it, sorry. So, as we conclude, I want us now to go back to the proverb, you know. He who does not know his beginning will walk in circles over his own shadow, you know. This specific essay, or rather this specific proverb, was here to let us know that the biological beginning of Africa is there. We have the historical beginning of pigmentation. We have the political beginning of racial hierarchy. And also we have the theological misreadings that harmed black identity. When knowledge replaces myth, the shadow loses its power. Understanding melanin is not about superiority or worship. It is about clarity, identity, and truth. Black people carry on one of nature's most ancient gifts within their skin, a gift that deserves understanding, not distortion. Yes. Guys, I hope that you've gained value from watching this. If you have, kindly subscribe and see you in the next one.